Now that the setting and the ring are joined into one object, you can change the material in the material properties to gold, which is a very simple yellowish coloured base colour, very high metallic factor and a reduced roughness, and it produces quite a good gold. Use the tab at the top to change the Active Workspace to shading. And then you can quickly edit the nodes for the material, adding a texture, a procedural texture, to use as a kind of beaten surface pattern, which will affect the roughness, and we can also use it to affect the apparent displacement of the surface. To start with, connect the texture to the base colour, and then we change the scale of the texture to see how it's going to look once we use it to control other properties. There are various factors that are used to change the style of the noise. When it looks about the right scale, move the height to the roughness. 0 roughness is shiny. 1 roughness is matte, and you can connect it to a whole series of different inputs. We add a node to control the amount of effects that the texture has. By multiplying by a value, we can make the roughness vary from 0 to 0.3 rather than from 0 to 1. We can also feed the value into the displacement, and this is generally not a normal way to use the displacement. Normally you would subdivide the mesh and then displace it with a texture, or you would use the texture for a normal to make it appear as if the surface was uneven. So the material for the emerald, we change the surface shader to glass BSDF and the base colour to a green colour, reduce the roughness. We can change the refractive index to something more like aluminium oxide, which is what emeralds are made from. And then we move the ring down so it fits in the slot. So these are going to be approximately where we want them to be for the final render. And we slot the emerald into the setting. The positioning of the objects is done by constraining the movement in the z-axis, along the z-axis. And we scale the emerald slightly so it's not perfectly spherical. We constrain the scaling to the XY plane. And finally, move the diamonds so they're all set into the ring. Again, these are going to use a glass shader, but with the colour set to white, and in theory they should have refractive index set to be something like the refractive index of diamond, reduce the roughness completely. Now we can select the material we've just created for all 4 diamonds. We'll cover in the next chapter naming materials and naming objects to make them easier to keep track of. The positioning, it doesn't really matter, but it's much easier to do in the orthographic view from the side rather than in perspective view and constraining the movement in a certain plane.